like taking a day off to read a good book. You could take a week if you want, but a good book, you just want to grab hold of it and be in there like a movie and read it from start to finish. And fall is the perfect season for that perfect book. And today, as part of our first Friday Toast to the Art Show, we are talking with Author-Kos-Kostmayer. He is an award-winning novelist. He's a poet. He's a playwright and screenwriter. And he's joining us to talk about his latest novel. It's called Fargo-Burns, and it's out now through Dr. Cicero Books. And you can get on Amazon, all those places, but I encourage you to go to his website, which is Author-Kos-Kostmayer.com, and that's KOSKOSTMAYER.com. I'm just, telling everybody I can spell, right, Nancy?
Mm-hmm.
You're the mother.
But I just have to say it's Cicero.
Cicero. I knew I was going to get it wrong. I was going to get something wrong.
That. Yes.
I knew it. I was like, I knew how to say it, but then I messed it up.
Well,
did I mess it up?
Now you get to mention it 3 or 4 times, and I like that.
Exactly.
See, Dr. Cicero. Who is Dr. Cicero?
Dr. Cicero is there is nobody at Dr. Cicero Books named Dr. Cicero. I think it derives its name from its association with a renowned scholar, and but there is no Dr. Cicero. It's he's a sort of a mysterious figure out of the past that generated the culture of that particular publishing house.
Well, and I think he told stories.
Yes,
I'm sure he did.
Yeah, it's a storyteller.
Right.
Maybe he's a road scholar like I am, but I'm on the road, ROAD.
Oh, that kind of scholar. Okay, yeah.
I just have to explain your pronunciation is because you were not raised in the States.
No,
so she goes European, British,
Dutch.
side of pronunciation, Dutch,
or Swahili.
Or Swahili. So
you
that's
never
why.
know.
Yeah, I think I speak one of those. I think I heard one. I think it was English that you mentioned. I can deal with you in English.
But listen, where is your heritage, Author-Kos-Kostmayer?
Well, my heritage, my people way back in the day came from Germany, and they came from England and France and Wales. But the Kostmayer is a German name. It derives from Germany, and but that's generations ago. And I was born in New Orleans, and which is where my family is from originally, and spent the first 5 years of my life in New Orleans, and then my parents moved north to New York City, and I grew up in and around New York City, but I had family in Mississippi and Louisiana, and
cool.
So I'm kind of I've got some Louisiana in my blood and some Mississippi in my blood, and basically I'm a New Yorker. So that's kind of my
wild. That's wild.
Yes.
That's wild because New York is like fast paced and everything, and then it's like Louisiana. It's like, oh, come on in and listen to some jazz and some music or some blues, and so it's like kind of this. It's the perfect balance, I would say, but creative, right?
New Orleans is such a great town, such a great city, and New York's such a great city, and really even in Fargo-Burns, the 2 central rhythms that dominate the book are the rhythms of the Deep South, which is a kind of a slow and richly melodic rhythm, and the speed of New York City, that quick shifting changes and that kind of jazzy rhythm of New York City. So those are really the 2 rhythms I carry around with me, and I feel kind of blessed to have both in my system.
I like it. Now, Fargo-Burns, Nancy grabbed hold of it, and she's not ruining it because she just keeps telling me everything, and she is really hooked in immediately. She's like, isn't that right, Nancy? You're like, that's it, and you need to read this because this guy's going off the rails. And
no, the character development is I kudos to you on that, because I feel like I know this guy. Yeah, I grew up in the 60s, and I feel like I can just say, well, it's this person, or that person. Take your choice, because they all went through the Vietnam thing, and that was a crazy time in our history where nobody can answer any questions about it. Everybody's confused about it.
Yeah, it was a tumultuous time, and I think that the roots of a lot of what we deal with today were really, I won't say they began there. They began way back in the past, but a lot of the turmoil and the violence and the division in the country and the conflict that we are encountering day after day now, and sort of the political upheaval that is threatening, either for better or worse, to reshape our country, was very much a part of that culture in the 60s. And Fargo-Burns, obviously, like you, Nancy, he comes out of that era, and he reflects a lot of its contradictions and its difficulties and its sort of desperate quest for a freedom which is difficult to attain. And so I'm glad you were able to identify with him. He does go off the rails, and I guess the book is really about his long attempt to get back on the rails. That's sort of the dominant theme of the book, I would say.
But he has a lot of choices to make.
he does. I don't know where you are in the book, but that's true, and it was. I think it was true. I think it's always true that we're faced with complicated choices, and making the right choice can just make such a tremendous difference in your life. And he's really he's sort of a bewildered character. And Jim Crace, who's a wonderful writer, wrote Being Dead and Quarantine, and he called him an intriguing and bewildered character who's bouncing back and forth like a pinball. And I think that's pretty accurate. He's moving at high speed and having trouble sort of figuring out what gear to be in and which direction in which to move.
Yeah, I agree. Totally.
But then also, I think about the stress that we have in just regular society, where people are. I remember doing an interview with an author who wrote the book Stress Pandemic, and he did go off the rails. He was a high-level executive, raking in the money, and all of a sudden he was freaking out, taking his clothes off on the conference table in front of all the board members, and absolutely lost it. And I think about that. I mean, when you talk about Vietnam era to now, and you think about how many wars our men and women have fought, and then everyone at home worried, and families, especially of our military folks, and then just this unrest that we have right now that you were talking about. I mean, we have this. It's Nancy and I've seen it just actually being on the road full time. We've put our, all of a sudden, oops, we better turn around a lot of times, especially in some of the major cities and capital cities. We've had to do a few turnarounds, but I think there's this, there's something has to be, we have to kind of calm down, man. I don't know, but I think it's important when you have a character that you can identify with, whether it's through a friend or maybe you're starting to freak out a little bit. I think people are freaking out.
Well, they are, and I think one of the things about that era, the 60s, and the war against Vietnam is that in some way it resembles in its own bizarre fashion the Civil War, because it was a war that really divided the nation against itself. And I remember reading back in that time when people were protesting against the war, and at a certain point, when Nixon was in office, the war was extremely unpopular with the American people, and there was a poll that reflected its high degree of unpopularity. The country no longer supported the war. The only thing the country disapproved of more strongly than the war were the protesters who were marching against the war. So that sort of thing is going on now as well. I mean, we're seeing a lot of people who are opposed to the kind of the racism which has pervaded our culture for 400 years, and but are also opposed to the people who are protesting against the racism. And there's a kind of civil war going on in the country now that similar to the one that went on during the Vietnam era, which in a way somehow echoes our own terrible civil war. And it just seems to be that this is a time more than ever when it's difficult for people to communicate with each other, and then when you add in, Nancy, the stress that you two were dealing with, which is the pandemic, and what the kind of stress that puts into our lives, and the separation we're forced to endure from people we love, it's just a terrifically difficult time, and I think it's one of those times that will reshape and change the culture. And some of us hope it changes one way, and some people hope it changes another way.
I remember my grandmother. She's British. And little 4'9" Spitfire of a British woman who I spent half of my life being raised by my parents and a good amount of time being raised by her, back and forth. And she used to, like, when we watched television together, and you'd see something like the demonstrations, can't say riots, demonstrations from the 60s. And she used to say, it's so unseemly And
Right,
she's,
right.
and I was looking at her like, yeah, but they're trying to make a point. She goes, but there's other ways. You could write letters. And, and so there was that call me like, did you look for a better way before you went there?
Right, right. Yeah.
And that voice of cold reason of, I'm sure it didn't have to be that way. You could have maybe sent them a blueberry pie or something.
Right. Well, I guess what some people call riots and what I call demonstrations are what Martin Luther King called the language of the dispossessed, the language of the marginalized. That it has its own vocabulary, and sometimes it's the only language people will hear. And
right.
But it always creates a lot of turmoil, and it always creates a backlash. And and I can make the question we're facing today, which we faced during the Vietnam era, and which we faced many times, is how the backlash will wash up against the quest for change, and how those two things are going to mix, and how combustible will that mix be? So it's I think there's a Chinese saying, "Pray that you do not live in interesting times," but we live in interesting times.
Yeah, we do, and
the 60s were very interesting. Nancy,
you get to do it twice.
That's right.
I know.
Yeah, right.
Like, thanks a lot. No,
you get to suffer repeatedly. What a joy.
No, but it's interesting to watch how people handle things, and how some people go off the rails over it, and other people go, oh yeah, what's new? There's so many different reactions, and I have to say, the media, there's so much stuff about how the media plays it up, and the fake news, and the this and the that, and for Lisa and I, being traveling, we can actually see for ourselves, which is really valuable to me, because now I don't have to listen to somebody else say something. I could just go, oh yeah, well, actually I saw that, a tiny bit of it that gives me kind of a grounding of, okay, let's start from what I actually saw myself. And it puts a whole new perspective on it.
Well, it's a great thing about traveling around the country, and sort of in Fargo-Burns, I think we travel back and forth between Mississippi in the 1930s and 40s and into the 60s and New York City, and it's a kind of there is a kind of odyssey that's going on, and that his own inability to negotiate the conflicts that are devouring him is, I think, reflective of that kind of journey that you're describing, where we're all running, and we're running through history, and that's a field covered with landmines, and I think Fargo-Burns kind of reflects that just what you're describing now, and it gives the book its kind of quality of a continuous ricochet, and I
wanted to ask about.
Okay, let me just say this. Sorry, Lisa, but I just have to say that he does take time for a cool one.
Yeah, he does. Right. Yeah.
I like him. I like him a lot.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you like him. And I hope you enjoy the whole book. I hope you work your way through the whole book, and it gives you some kind of deep satisfaction.
Well, she hasn't gone to work. So, I'm just saying.
Right, sure.
That's why I said at the beginning, it's like when you get a really good book and that's it, everybody, like, I'm closed for the day. I think fall is such a good book reading day. I mean, it's like you could get your favorite beverage and watch the leaves fall and just read and be cozy. There's something, and I don't care how dramatic the book can get, there's something about fall that is like the perfect book reading weather. Obviously, all seasons are, but there's just a thing about fall in books that I dig. But I wanted to ask about, looking at everything that you're portraying this book in regards to getting back into what people are going through in Vietnam and the stress that's attached to it, and how you can get into drug addiction, alcoholism, mental health issues. You're raising mental health issues. I mean, he thought he was a dog, and that his psychiatrist is Virginia Woolf. Swampy.
Right.
I mean, she's just swampy. I mean, that would freak me the hell out. Get out of that dream, right? But so he's going through that. But when you were writing this book, was it something you were thinking, oh, I want to write it for this way? Or is it the story comes first and then it's like, oh, yeah, this is a good reminder for the public? You know what I mean?
Well, the truth is, I guess I'll say two things about it. Is when I started to write the book, I was earning my living as a screenwriter in Hollywood, which was a really superb way to make a good living. But it didn't put me in touch with any of the kind of writing I really wanted to do. And and I was I was busy as a screenwriter. I was lucky to get work steadily, and I just got frustrated with my own work, with my own growing disconnection from the sort of writing that I had always wanted to do. And so I decided to just spend some time every day in my studio working on something other than a screenplay. And I sat down and without any particular idea, started writing what turned out to be this book. And I never had a story or a plot, and I never gave any thought to what other people might think about the book, whether they would like it, whether I would publish it, whether they would read it. It was just for me. I wanted to attain a certain level of freedom and spontaneity and get back into the world of surprise and discovery that was closed to me in Hollywood. Because in Hollywood, I would have to give people what they were paying me for, and they were paying me well, and they were good people, and I liked them, and I wanted to satisfy them, but I wanted to satisfy myself as well, which is why I started writing Fargo-Burns. So I didn't know where it was going to go, and I didn't know how I would get there, and I didn't really have a plan for it, but I sort of trusted that I could sometimes follow the language and sometimes let my imagination take the lead, and sometimes rooted in my own history or the history of people I've been close to, or the history of the 60s, and that eventually a story would emerge and the shape would present itself. So there's a certain level of spontaneity and discovery in the creation of this particular book, which I found particularly satisfying, I have to say.
I think that's integrity to the art,
cool.
and I think that's so important that, I know people have an audience like, musicians and writers and artists, and it's like if you don't write what's pure to you, I think then it's almost a disservice to the audience, right? It's like your readers, and I think it's great when someone can just do exactly what they want to do. I mean, there's some few choice words I wanted to say on the radio show, and I've watched it as best I can. But you know what I mean? I think there's really something important about that. That's where the line of art really happens. But I do want to tell people, the movie I Love You to Death, that you were a part of that. You wrote you wrote the screenplay, right, for that, and produced it?
I did. That was actually based on I was working in Hollywood, and I went to Los Angeles because I had a play that opened in Los Angeles, and the play did very well and received some really wonderful reviews and was named the best play of the year by the Los Angeles Drama Critics, and that enabled me to get work in television and film. So I was able to begin to make a living, to make some money, which I desperately needed. So that led to me working in television, and some producers came to me with an actual story, a true story that they had read about a philandering husband who cheated on his wife obsessively, and she made repeated unsuccessful attempts to kill him. And eventually she ended up in prison, and when she got out of prison, they got remarried again.
No way.
So, yeah, that's the truth. And I know the couple. I met the couple, and they're really quite wonderful. I'm very fond of both of them, and stayed in touch with them for quite some time. And but anyway, it was based on a true story, and then eventually it was turned into a movie, and it was directed by Lawrence Kasdan, who's a wonderful writer and a director, and a terrific person too, by the way. And he'd made The Big Chill, and
see, that's still one of my favorite movies of all time.
Well,
The
mine
Big Chill.
too. Yeah.
And William Hurt. I mean, the cast that you had in I Love You to Death. I mean, that was. I remember that movie, and it's funny because River Phoenix was in it. We were just in a bed and breakfast where the people that bought the bed and breakfast in '91 were kind of bidding on another big historic mansion in Gainesville, Florida. That River Phoenix's girlfriend wanted River to buy, and so they didn't get to buy that, but they ended up with another property that served them very well, and still does to this day. But
the cast
about the '60s, it was a hippie commune. But yeah,
sure, of course, and the cast was remarkable. That had more to do with Larry Kasdan than it did certainly with my script. But it was Kevin Kline and Tracy Ullman and River Phoenix and William Hurt and Keanu Reeves and Jack Kaler and James Gammon. I mean, it was just a sensational cast, and of course, not too long after the movie opened, River died of a drug overdose, and that was a tremendous loss, obviously, to people who knew him and cared about him, and to his family and friends. But really, he was such a gifted actor, and so it was a huge cultural loss as well. But the cast was quite astonishing, and the whole experience of working on the film was just a revelation to me. And I was there, I was a part of the whole process as a witness, as an observer. So it was a rich experience for me. And oddly enough, one of the things it taught me was that I did not want to stay in Hollywood and make my career there. But I loved the experience.
Screenwriting thing, because Nancy said that immediately she was so hooked in. And I always wonder about, like, when someone's done screenwriting, and especially also because you're a poet, I find this really fascinating, because poetry is, I love poetry, because to me it's like, it's musical literature to me because of rhythm, and I love that, because I write songs and all that, but I think there's something about poetry, and I think we really need to grasp more of it in this country. I feel like the art form is forgotten sometimes, and I'm seeing more and more of it come out. I know Chicago did a really good job with poetry slams, and there's the Poetry Foundation and everything, but I would like to see more and more, so I really appreciate your work with that. But when you also look at screenplays, it's so fast-moving, and also writing visually. Does that help you write a novel?
Well, you open up a really insightful area because for several reasons. First of all, in terms of the style of Fargo-Burns, I think that my work as a screenwriter, my work in television, where I worked hand in hand with the editors constantly, cutting film and abbreviating and finding ways to compress the time language of the film, and to concentrate the vocabulary of the film, and poetry, which is all about compression and concision. And poetry was once defined by Joseph Brodsky as a form of accelerated intelligence, and it's certainly an accelerated form. And all of those forms, I think, have had a huge influence on me. And I'm glad you mentioned music, because it makes me think of what Charlie Parker said. He said when he realized that he could play what was inside him, that was the day he was born. And there's no question that my own love of music, and particularly jazz, and the quick changes, the improvisational and spontaneous nature of jazz, has had a big influence on my work. So you really have identified something, and I appreciate it, that this combination of film and the grammar of film, the fast cutting and the ability to move from in time and place seamlessly, and the compression of poetry and the concision that you associate with poetry, and the kind of musical rhythm of jazz and of rhythm in general, they all are very important to me. And to the extent that I've been able to incorporate that into my work, it's a source of some pleasure to me. So it's so nice to hear that you sort of see that and share that feeling.
Yeah, go ahead, Nancy.
I was just going to say, for Fargo-Burns, I already see this as a TV series, and this, I know, just hear me out on it. I feel
don't send me back to Hollywood.
No. I feel like Nick Nolte is the old Fargo-Burns who narrates what happens with Fargo-Burns up to the point where he becomes Nick Nolte.
Well, you've already given me another great cast. I like that. Nick Nolte, that's a wonderful beginning. I would love that. Well, I think there is a visual element in it, and because I come out of theater, and because I come out of film and television, and because I'm a poet as well as a novelist, I think that visual element matters to me. And I'm married to a visual artist. Martha, my wife, Martha Ferris, is an artist. She is a painter. She's an astonishing artist, and living with her and just continually drenched in the beauty and the power of her work and her grammar, her vocabulary, which is so different from what the kind of freedom that a writer experiences, has been just tremendous for me. So I think the visual aspect plays a big part for me, and it's definitely there in Fargo-Burns. I would love to have someone turn it into a film or a good TV series. That'd be great, and maybe that'll happen. We'll see.
Well, this is interesting also what you talk about with your wife, Martha, with what she's doing, the visual aspect. And again, Martha Ferris, everybody check her out, her workout. And what is dinner like for the two of you? Because I'm always fascinated about this. Because when creative people get together, you're either do really make creative good meals, and you know, though it's like another art form that you can unite on, or it's not. Like, it's what is dinner like, or is it dinner, lunch, or breakfast? Where do you come together food wise?
Well, I always make our breakfast, and I always make a big breakfast because we both wake up hungry. We wake up early in the morning. We're very much morning people, and so I always make breakfast, and I always make something pretty elaborate and full. We have a big breakfast, and then we go to work. She goes into her studio, and I go into my office, and we work, and we have a very light, quick lunch. If it's nice weather, we sit outside and eat, or
Cool.
if it's not, we just grab a snack, and then. And we have wonderful dinners, and the reason we do is we share our home with our youngest daughter, Sam, who is also a writer and a scholar and an activist, and her husband, Faraz Suleiman, who is a poet, a great Syrian poet, a very acclaimed writer. And all four of us like to,
Cool.
And even if COVID-19 had not shut down restaurants all throughout New York State and all around the country, we probably wouldn't eat out that much because it's very expensive, and because we always eat so well at home. We have our own garden. We have our chickens.
Cool.
We have our yard eggs. So,
awesome!
For dinner for us is a kind of a big deal, and we're lucky. So we have a little piece of land, and we have good vegetables and good yard eggs, and all four of us like to cook, and we all cook different styles. So
cool.
Yeah. Dinner's a big deal for us.
I knew
awesome.
it. See, I get 10 points
That's
for
awesome.
that. I know,
You
because
do.
I mean, and the conversations have to be like amazing.
Well,
like,
it's all
you know,
attention to detail.
I want to be the fly on the wall with a bottle of wine.
Well, you don't have to be a fly on the wall. You could be the guest at the table, and you have to wait till the virus is over, but or else we have to sit outside. But you don't have to be the fly. You can be the actual human person. We'd love to have you both.
Oh, that would be so awesome. Thank you. And
well,
you never know.
When you're in New York State, whenever you come to New York State, which is really beautiful, and you're in the Hudson River Valley where we live, which is also beautiful, you have my number, and you'll call us up, and if the COVID-19 is behind us, you'll definitely come out and have dinner.
I'm going to whip that thing. I just feel like I want a big whip everywhere I go. Like, whip that thing. Just get rid of it. Get rid of it. It needs to go. Like, you know, I just want to wave a magic wand or a whip or whatever. I don't know, wand or whip, doesn't matter. It needs to go. But we were very close. We were up in Lake Erie, and they're like, you could just go over here and you're in Buffalo. And I'm like, I've never been to Buffalo. We got to go to Buffalo. I don't know, but they have good wine there too. But all this writing, and the other thing, you know, poetry, I think is fascinating. Going back to that and the writing form too. We recently chatted with a friend who is a writer. We discovered is a crime writer. She kills off her husband in her novels. She's pretty cool. She's the sweetest lady, but she like kills
not
people.
her husband, just a husband.
A husband in her novels. But anyway, she said that when she really wanted to write, she knew she had to do it. It's like something that you can't ignore, something that keeps knocking on your door every day, you know. And she said that she's I'm going to go learn about it. And she went and took a course, and she went in, and the lady was like teaching poetry, and she's like, no, I'm here to learn about writing crime. And she goes, you've got to learn poetry first. And she was like, that's nuts. But she said she got so much out of writing poetry that it's helped her scat just in spades, just in regards to her writing. And who would think that poetry to crime writing, you know, and murder?
Well, I think poetry, the concision and compression and accelerated pressure of poetry could serve any writer in any form, no matter what it is. And also, you know, the thing about poetry is it doesn't walk from one place to another. It leaps, and sort of when it leaps from one place to another, the poetry takes place while the figure leaping is in the middle of the air. So, you know, poetry is not so easy to nail down, and I think it really introduces us to a notion of thinking in ways that lie beyond easy explanation, that lie beyond the explicable, that kind of challenge whatever our conventional sense of rhyme and reason might be. And I think that to bring that to your work, whatever the work, whether you're a chef or a plumber, a dentist, a novelist, a poet, I think that's a great thing. I think there should be much more poetry in our lives. And you mentioned earlier that our culture suffers from a dearth of poetry and a dearth of attention to it. And I think that the more deeply drenched in poetry we are as a culture, the better off we'll be. So I don't think we can get too much of it. I think that teacher had a good point.
You know, I think because poetry makes you have to think. It's like as a painter myself, I think of the difference between paint your own picture or paint by number. Get one of those paint by number kits, right? And then try to make it your own, but you still can't because you started with somebody else's blueprint. So it's never going to be yours, you know? So I think poetry is kind of like that, where it not only does it force the author to choose carefully the words that are used, but it also leaves some responsibility to the reader to have to think it through.
I think that's exactly right. I think that's exactly right. And if there were more poetry in our schools and more people were exposed to it earlier and more often, I think it would make a difference. I think it would be a great benefit for people.
I think it teaches critical thinking. And I think that's critical thinking, also how to formulate your opinion, which a lot of times now we're in such a weird world. Like, you know, it's like, are you politically correct or incorrect or what? I mean, it's like at the end of the day, art is what actually just goes, screw you, I'm doing it. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm going for it. This is what is in here. It's coming out, and that's that, man. Because there's a certain demon behind art. There is. Like, no matter how you look at it, there's this little devil that says, yeah,
I'm
that little
it.
hair that's going to come out. It's going to happen. It's just, and if you ignore it, it's going to have to happen. And that's kind of interesting when you think about the story, you know, of Fargo. You know, that Fargo-Burns. I mean, you think about him and how he loses it in the beginning of the story. I know that's the beginning part, but that's kind of the same thing. If you ignore something, eventually the explosion is going to happen. The pimple will turn into a boil, and that will explode.
Right. Well, I couldn't agree more, and certainly that happens with Fargo. I think the pressure inside that doesn't get released in any sort of socially acceptable way, or in a creative way, or even in a loving way, finally just blows him up, and that's the beginning of a whole new set of discoveries for him, and that's what you're going through, I guess, as you read the book.
Now, you know, I like it because I've often wanted to be a dog. I love dogs, and sometimes when I was reading this, I'm thinking, okay, it's like he's a dog and he's going to bark. I'm like, okay, is he a Great Dane or a Pekingese? And like, if you're in a department store, you want to be a Pekingese and you just bite people's ankles on the way out. But now, if you're somewhere else, you might want to be a Doberman Pinscher. You know, it's like, this is pretty cool. You know, it's like turn into an animal and just be that animal for a few hours, and then you find yourself in a home somewhere.
But that's a form of escape.
How free would you feel? Like, I am now going to be a Doberman Pinscher. Watch out. I'm going to bite your ass.
If you haven't already read, you should read The Once and Future King, in which the young King Arthur is turned by Merlin into a series of animals. So he gets to experience. Oh, it's wonderful. Yeah. He gets to experience what is it like to be underwater and be a fish, or flying and be a goose, or and the design behind that is that it will make King Arthur, when he rises into power, more empathic, because he will have been not just a human animal, but various kinds of animals, and it's very lovely. It's sort of it takes your conceit and turns it into the opening of a really beautiful book.
Oh, cool. And okay, you mentioned flying. I was on your website. Everybody, you got to go to it, Author-Kos-Kostmayer.com, and that's with a K. What's up with the flying dreams? Because I have them all the time, and they're like,
oh, you're lucky.
I feel like you're like in another world. Like, I feel like Sinbad the Sailor. It starts off when you start running, and then all of a sudden your legs are it's weird. There's all kinds of them. And so you do that too. You fly.
Well, I have flying dreams. I don't have a lot of them. But they're thrilling. And lots of people apparently don't have them. and I always feel badly for them. I want them to have flying dreams because that's an experience. It's really incomparable, and the kind of freedom you discover in a flying dream. And when you wake up, there's always this feeling. It takes you a second to realize, oh, I'm awake now, and that was a dream, because you're so exhilarated by what you've just been through. And I did have I've written a play called The Dream of Perfect Freedom, which the play actually came out of a dream, and I have a novel coming out, not this year, but next year, also that came out of a dream. So, and a number of my poems have come directly out of dreams. So, dreaming is fertile ground. You know, the great American poet Delmore Schwartz said that in dreams begin responsibilities. And that's not normally the way we think about dreams. We normally think about dreams as an escape, but for him, it was, you were escaping into a deeper truth. You were escaping into the kind of responsibility that artists are called upon to practice. So, I think dreams are great, and flying dreams are, man, they're heavenly. And you're lucky you have them. A lot of people don't have them.
I have them, and I go through a series of them. Like, I haven't had one for a while, but I also wonder, like, are we astro traveling at that point?
Yeah, like you could go somewhere else. New dimension.
I wonder about that. Like, I get weird about it, and I get weird about dreams because something will happen later that you go, dude, that was just in my dream. Did I manifest it, or is it all part of this natural thing? And then I trip out. I know I'm weird, but the flying dreams are so. You say that on your website about it being like this total freedom. Like it is the ultimate thing that you can fly and go somewhere. And it's this surreal, like, wow, we can do this. And I wonder about, like, my fear of heights. Like, when we go on mountain passes, I'd still do them. I push myself to go to these places that I'm deathly afraid of and really just want to sit down and wet in my pants, you know, that kind of fear. I'm either going to I will just freeze, you know. Even on a mountain pass, I'll just stop the car like I'm dead, but I don't do it. But I wonder if it's part of this flying thing, and it's, I don't know, man. Do you ever, like, trip out on that kind of it? Like, why are we doing it?
No. Why are we flying, or why are we driving up in a mountain, or why are we wetting our pants?
Well, no, leave the mountain. That's just normal, like, crazy. But with the flying in dreams, do you think it's, like, part of some weird woo-woo thing that happens to us, or, like, past lives, or does it just happen?
I don't really have a theory about it. You know, in Fargo-Burns, Fargo for a while, you know, he's in a mental hospital at one point, and then he's seeing a psychiatrist, and then she places great value on dreams, and she thinks that they contain rich information about what you're feeling and where you are in your life. And but she says they're beyond explanation. They remain forever mysterious. It's even bizarre that we have dreams. You know, they play a huge physiological part in our lives in terms of helping us sort of, you know, helping brain activity, and they have a real medical purpose, but they're also so strange and bizarre and liberating, and I find them utterly inexplicable, and I love having them. And sometimes when I remember my dreams, it really enriches my day, and as I say, I've done a good deal of writing directly in response to dreams, you know, transcribed the dream and then turned it into a poem or a play, or in one case an entire novel. So they're a rich resource, but I don't pretend to understand them, and I'm just grateful for them. But I don't really know where they come from, why we have them, or I do know that that years ago there was a terribly cruel experiment conducted where a group of doctors decorticated cats. They did brain surgery on cats and removed that part of the brain which generates dreaming.
Shame on them.
And the cats perished. I mean, they couldn't.
Shame on them.
You need your dreams really to survive, and I think in the book she quotes Delmore Schwartz saying, "In dreams begin responsibilities." I think they do carry with it a charge to possess a certain kind of freedom, a certain kind of emancipation, and I'm grateful for them. But they're surpassingly strange. Let's face it.
They're legal LSD.
Okay. I took for about 6 to 8 months. I took a self-hypnosis class from Dr. Gilboyne in North Hollywood, and he was really a famous hypnotist. And I found it, at first I thought, man, this is pretty cool because you can hypnotize yourself. I took it because I was in a position where I had to speak in front of a lot of people, and I knew what I wanted to say, but I'd get in front of people, and then I had nothing came out of my mouth. I was like, ugh. So I took it to get past that, and it did help me do that. But along the way, some of the teachings that he had were pretty weird, and he talked about dreams and how you can hypnotize yourself before you go to sleep to dream through a problem, like a problem-solving dream. Mm-hmm. And what would you do in your dreams? And then you'd wake up and you knew exactly what to do the next morning to get past this problem. And then he said, and then once you're used to doing that, then you understand how much control over your mind you really do have if you elect to take it. And then he said, be careful with it, because then you're working 24 hours. You're not really sleeping if you're controlling your dreams. And I'm like, man, you're giving so many mixed messages here. But it's something to think about, because I used it and still today can use it when I feel like I need it. But then, especially as a painter, you can tell yourself something and in the morning paint. I've never had that big, I can't face the white canvas, I don't know what to do, or writers who may have writer's block. You can totally use self-hypnosis to do that, and it is a state of being in a dream, but you're channeling your dream to be useful, as he used to say, to be useful as opposed to freewheeling it and then trying to figure it out. So it's kind of interesting, that whole concept, because sometimes you feel like, well, man, we need some freewheeling. Don't want to have to control everything. On the other hand, if you can control it a bit, make it useful, what's wrong with that?
I remember reading years ago that in Native American cultures, that if someone had a dream, let's say a terrifying dream, a nightmare, for example, they're being chased and they're chased off a cliff, and they plunge off a cliff, and it's a nightmare, that they would be encouraged by the shaman and instructed by the shaman to repeat the dream, but to reach a different conclusion, and that they had the gift or the power or the genius to transform the dream, so that the next night that person would be being chased toward the cliff and would turn into a bird and fly away.
Yeah,
and
cool.
I have tried many times to do that, to have had a dream, a frightening dream, and tried and hoped that I could rearrange the conclusion of the dream. But I've never been able to do it. I've never been able to repeat the dream. The dream came once. I got one visit, and that was it. The dream wasn't coming back again. So I've never been able to do it, and I guess I have mixed feelings, as you do, about it's something about not being able to control part of our mind is liberating too, and having dreams which are so out of our control operate freely inside our spirit is pretty appealing in a way.
Yeah,
I'm a Virgo, man.
He said,
I need to let it go.
He said when you're dreaming and it's frightening, to imprint that, and he always said there's certain words, imprint that on my mind, like, but you're now asleep, but somehow it's like you say to yourself, imprint that on my mind, and you will wake up with that picture on your mind, and you know exactly what happened. It's weird, but I will say I've done it. It works, but it's exhausting, and so it's like working while you're trying to sleep, but it serves a purpose. It really does. So it's kind of like how much, I don't know. It's a good area to investigate. And it's also an area when you've done a little investigation to leave alone for a bit.
Sure,
I kind of think it's part of a meditation. It's a different take. It's like a different form of meditation. Like those dreams, I've tried to go back because I may have really loved a dream and it's like magical. You can have all kinds of emotions. You know, you can have very loving emotions. You can have very, oh my God, fearful. You know, all of that. And so sometimes you want to go back and say, okay, what was that? I see that person, but I can't see their face. Who was that? You know, and you can't go back. And then you start controlling it. And then at that point, it's like, it's crumbled. It's done. You can't, it's weird. It's weird to try and go back because I feel like it's a real, true creative process that it's almost, I don't know, like I said, I'm a Virgo. So when it happens, I feel like it's a form of freedom, whereas like I'm organized, even if I give people the wrong phone numbers for radio shows. It's my form of freedom, of letting go. I don't know. It's an interesting thing, but it's interesting to hear how you use that in writing. Tell us what is coming up in 2021. Everyone's got to go get Fargo-Burns like that. You need to go get that now. It's out now. But what's coming up in 2021?
Well, in 2021, Dr. Cicero Books will bring out my second novel, which is called The Politics of Nowhere, and deals primarily with the various ways in which people handle loss, tragic loss. And so that will be out in February, and that's what's happening in 2021. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm hoping that we can also look forward to a vaccine, the end of COVID-19, and
please.
And a more progressive and sane political environment to live in.
Can you tell Dr. Cicero? See, I can say it now because he just said it. Dr. Cicero, can you find a vaccine, please?
That's right. Well, this is a wonderful publishing house. I wouldn't put anything past these people.
Oh, that's awesome.
And they have a great catalog. Dr. Cicero Books. I urge people to go to their website. They have a great catalog. They have wonderful writers, Carrie Harrison, John Keller, Faraz Suleiman, who is my son-in-law and a great Syrian poet, Robert Kelly. They have really outstanding writers, Celia Bland, lots of wonderful writers. I recommend that people go to Dr. Cicero Books and explore their catalog. It's well worthwhile.
Cool. Oh, I love that. And I mean, you got to think of like all the great poets that came out of Syria too. Like think about that. I mean, there's some of our prophets, like, prophetic writings, let's put it that way. I don't want to get everybody all freaked out, religious-wise. I didn't mean it that way. But anyway, so everyone, go and keep up with Kos at his website, Author-Kos-Kostmayer.com. So it's Mayer, Author-Kos-Kostmayer.com. And, of course, get Fargo-Burns at all your favorite places, Amazon, all those great places. And go to your independent bookstores. A lot of them will, if they're not open now, they'll still do it online, but go to your library and request the books that you want. So especially go to those independent bookstores. But thank you so much for joining it. It's been a real pleasure.
It's been a pleasure for me. I was so happy to speak with both of you. I really enjoyed it.
Good. Yeah, thanks. And may we all have awesome dreams tonight. See you in the sky, everybody.
Yeah, happy dreams. Take care of yourselves.
Thanks. And here it is. We're going to close this segment with an awesome song. It's called Fiction Theater. It's one of my ultimate favorite songs. It's written by Michael Ealy and Spider Taylor. It really rocks. This is from their band Red Wedding from the 70s over in L.A. They really transformed the music scene. So take a listen. Here it is, Fiction Theater.
Another sad production.